insights might come out of this conversation about and the experience of having and the psychedelic experience. But whether or not those insights are good or not is like a whole other question.
I've been really orienting more and more towards the calendar of the seasons and the different energies that it represents, and encourage others to do the same. So for me, my context and relationship with psychedelics started when I was very young. And my first kind of work in the psychedelic ecosystem was in producing what is called transformational festivals. And so for me, I've always been situated in the relationship between culture and community. And this idea that we as a people who are engaging with non-ordinary states are part of creating a culture around psychedelics, a contemporary culture. And what I've learned is that we can only be accountable towards those who we are in relationship with.
It was hard to grow up in the environment that I did without having some sort of contact with it, and had early interest and curiosity, non-ordinary states generally, not just with psychedelics, but also dreaming and other kind of modalities of understanding consciousness and reality outside of kind of the normative way that I felt like we were kind of, that I was experiencing it. That kind of seeking and exploration really paid off in the sense that there are, in fact, so many different ways to think about and engage with the world. And having opportunities to explore that at a young age, you take the bold and courageous step of seeing if you can change reality and figuring out what is it that makes up reality. I know that there's everything from product design to social design to cultural design and everything in between has been really focused on this area of science and research and treatment, which are all super important. And the work that MAPS has done and other organizations around the field over years has built up some of that infrastructure that is still being put into place to create hopefully medical access and sort of a treatment for an indication, treatment for a disorder of some kind context. So thinking about psychedelic care as a sort of kind of way of recognizing the, for lack of a better, less cliche term, interconnectedness between us as humans, us as societies, and these pieces in between, the kind of caring, both the caring capacity as well as the kind of in between liminal elements that allow for cohesion in a system to all be seen, to all be made aware of, so that when we do make decisions about design, whether it's the policy and law that influences behavior, or whether it's how you create a system that brings in businesses or other stakeholders to participate in the creation of a new business economic ecosystem paradigm, like I was talking about with North Star, that we're like looking at all the pieces as clearly as we possibly can, and not allowing as many of the, I think, especially in modernity, invisibilized externalities to kind of come and kick us in the butt later, or be ignored and undermined and then cause problems later.
Great gifts of psychedelics is that it brings us all the way back into the root and into the first principles of the fundamentals of like, okay, how are we designed society? Because everything is a choice that first existed in the mind of humans. We have this opportunity to show up to these moments, this culture creation. We know that saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and we're still in this creating the cultural norms of the contemporary movement. When we're talking about psychedelic care, we mean for everyone. And so how do we then address the systems that have led to the conditions where people are in unhealth and are, in sickness?
I won't go over my favorite, 5,000 years of psychedelic history in 5 minutes. I want to bring attention to the fact that there's all these other ways that these practices have been utilized throughout history. A lot of the plant medicines that have been utilized in different parts of the world over an extended period of time were not just used in the context of like a specific ceremony for a specific purpose, but rather in more of like a cosmological world building that actually had what is the container in which we do that, and how do we do that in a way that is generative, exploratory, interconnected, relational, and so on and so on.
Currently, psychedelics are a bipartisan issue. We've got people on both sides of the aisle who are in support. We have people from all walks of life and all backgrounds who are experiencing benefit from exposure to psychedelics. My fear is in the commodification and in the commercialization of psychedelics that the experiences themselves will get shallower. Are they helping us dissociate from the incredible complexity and the challenges of our times? Or are they helping us to integrate more deeply with ourselves and with the opportunities that we might have to be part of creating the more beautiful world that we know is possible? Integration that can happen when you're in an ongoing relationship with people who are walking down or traversing this path together, shoulder to shoulder. How can we ensure that we are deepening the taproot and creating the context and conditions and paradigms where people can be strengthened by their inside of their relationships with their communities, with their families, with their neighbors and neighborhoods, and feel a sense of immense responsibility for participating in making this world more beautiful, whether it's just on your own block, in your own town. They train their volunteer listeners in the art of deep listening and peer support. And so for me, that's like so powerful. And that to me is where more of the opportunity lies. How can we create space to have this culture of care, and what can it mean if we become a more caring society on the microcosmic level?
I really like the example that you were giving around like these conversations and mutual aid in these pieces. I think that it's very interesting to see, and I think even outside of just like the infrastructure, looking at harm reduction within the drug policy and public health and kind of mutual drug user internal need, like the movement to create when the infrastructure for care did not exist in the formal system, government and so on. People who needed to solve a problem organized to do so and did so in a response that was seen, acknowledged, diagnosed, and responded to within the community itself. We're going to like literally make our own and create parallel alternative infrastructure that over time, maybe the government or healthcare systems or whatever will catch up with. That there's this sort of desire to romanticize and even more than that, like calcify our idea of what the past looks like or was. In even the most traditional context, even in all of the conversations about earth-based traditions throughout history, throughout the world, that there has been interrelatedness, intercultural exchange, and adaptation literally from the beginning, and it will go till the end. And just maybe one more just grounded example. You mentioned, appropriative, and I'm not going to go down the whole rabbit hole of appropriation right now. I think it's a very important conversation. But and I think in some ways it's been reduced in the public consciousness as like something that's more than just like the benefiting someone who's taken something from another culture.
We continually recreate the problem in the solutions that we propose. It is just part of our impulses as human beings who have been raised and encultured in certain ways to value certain ways of certain approaches to problem solving, mode of trying to move fast and break things, to figure everything out in the most reductionary, materialistic way, and then to do the linear thinking A plus B equals C and come up with the solutions and then scale them as quickly as possible, right? And he says the times are urgent, slow down. And even that is like, wait, what do you mean slow down? There's like existential risks happening in every dimension of existence. The human mind feels the most comfortable when it understands and can explain what is happening. And the truth is that we are vastly outweighed by not knowing, by what we don't know and the mystery. When we step outside, are we stepping lightly onto the earth, right? Are we being mindful and in awareness of the ways that we, impact our environment as we move through our days?
What we see going on, what we experience through our senses is not the whole picture. One of the frames that I have found personally very helpful is differentiating problems and dilemmas. I think a problem is something you can solve, where there's a sustainable answer and an outcome that then like solves the problem. Whereas a dilemma is something that can't really solve managed and is more of like an ongoing process.
I just want to name that there is no one psychedelic culture. I think when we saw the Renaissance in the 60s, when there was like maybe 4 million people who used psychedelics in that decade total. I mean, I don't even know I think there was like 8 million people last year in the United States who said they use psychedelics. So there is no one psychedelic culture anymore, because I just like, it's so related to how I ended up on this path that I am currently on in my life. Was like, there I am leading the Boston Anti-War Coalition, taking a lot of mushrooms, and coming into this realization that we actually have all the tools and information, everything we need to live in perfect harmony on the planet. How are we showing up in our world in the most basic and simple ways? And what are we creating of value, of meaning, of beauty?
It's funny because even in the early days of like the post 9/11 anti-war movement in the United States, there was actually this tension came up, which is like, is this an anti-war movement or is this a peace movement? What's the difference? There's this like shared experience that so many people have. In the case of religion or spirituality, there's like something bigger than us. Or in case of intercultural relationships, that we want to get along. We have the tools. We have to look at how we do things differently. The how is actually in some ways more important than this, than the what. Not the what isn't important, but you kind of get to the substance.
And I think that as like a design principle, it's like true humility is going to be needed for us to really develop and build the constellation and the mycelial networks of care and culture that hopefully can bring forward the type of really rooted and resilient psychedelic culture that I believe we're capable of.